This is Mrs. Wayner's Math Class, Chapters 6, 7, and 8, Packet B, Lesson 3. Simplify fractions, otherwise known as reduced fractions, otherwise known as putting fractions into lowest terms. These are the lazy man tricks. Today's learning target, by the end of the lesson, you should confidently be able to say, I can fully simplify fractions, I can fully reduce fractions, I can put fractions into lowest terms. Because if you do one, you did them all. They all mean the same thing. We fully simplify a fraction by finding the GCF of both the numerator and denominator and dividing both by it. It isn't hard, but there are two lazy man tricks that sometimes work. Not all the time, but sometimes work. And I think they're fast and easy tricks to try, so I always try them first. For the first example, we'll teach you this, trying each trick with 3 different problems. Please do know, however, that if you find the lazy man tricks confusing, you can ignore the tricks and do all the problems with the GCF way if you prefer. So example number 1 says fully simplify these fractions. We have the fraction A, which is 9/18, fraction B, which is 10/15, and fraction C, which is 21/35. Let's try lazy man trick number 1 on all of these fractions and see if it works. Lazy man trick number 1 says if the numerator is a factor of the denominator, then the numerator is the GCF. So I have my lazy man trick number 1 and my problem on top. Let's try letter A. I have 9/18 that I need to fully simplify, and lazy man trick number 1 says if the numerator is a factor of the denominator, then the numerator is the GCF. Well, my numerator is 9, and the best way to find out if it's a factor of the denominator is to go through my multiples of 9 and see if I ever say 18, my denominator. So I say 9, 18, ooh, stop, 18. 18 is my denominator. Therefore, 9 is a factor of 18. So that means that the GCF of 9 and 18 is 9. Now that I know the GCF, I have to go ahead and use that GCF to simplify the fraction. So what do? Well, anytime I work with a fraction, whatever I do to one part of the fraction, I have to do to the other part of the fraction. And to make sure that I remember that, if I'm going to have to simplify a fraction, I first start with a window box. I put a line in the center of it, like a fraction bar is in the center of the numerator and denominator. I call this a window box because it looks like a window, right? It looks like what they call a double hung window. And the top is the same size as the bottom. That reminds me that I have to do the same thing in both parts of the window box. I want to simplify the fraction or reduce it or put it into lowest terms. So what I'm looking for is an equivalent fraction that equals the same amount, but with smaller digits in the numerator and denominator. If I want to make my digits smaller, I'm going to divide. So I put a division sign by each part of my window box. Now, what goes inside my window box? The GCF. And I found out that 9 is the GCF. I'm going to say equals and put a fraction bar because I knew my new answer will be a fraction, and bring my GCF up into the window box. Whatever number goes in the top must go in the bottom. So the GCF goes into both parts of the window box. And now I go ahead and do the math. 9 divided by 9 for my numerator equals 1. 18 divided by 9 equals 2. So 9/18 fully simplified is 1/2. Let's take a look at example B, 10/15. Well, lazy man trick number 1 says if the numerator is a factor of the denominator, then the numerator is the GCF. In 10/15, my numerator is 10. So I'm going to go through my 10 times tables and see if I get to 15. 10, 20, oh, that's too high. No. This trick does not work because my numerator is not a factor of my denominator. So I cannot do trick number 1 with letter B. Let's move on and try letter C, 21/35. Again, lazy man trick number 1, if the numerator is a factor of the denominator, then the numerator is the GCF. So I want to go through my 21 times tables. So 21, add another 21 to that, and I'd get 42. Oh, that's larger than 35. So no, the trick does not work for letter C. So our lazy man trick does work for letter A, but it does not work for B or C. We've solved A, so now let's see if lazy man trick number 2 works for B and C. Lazy man trick number 2. You can only try this trick if you tried trick number 1 and it doesn't work. You cannot try trick number 2 unless you've already tried trick number 1. Also, in order to try trick number 2, the numerator must be an even number. It will not work if the numerator is not an even number. What is the trick? If half of the numerator is a factor of the denominator, then that's the GCF. So let's see how this works in the next example. The fraction for example B says 10/15. Now remember, lazy man trick number 2 says only try this trick if trick number 1 does not work. We tried trick number 1. It did not work. 10 was not a factor of 15. So trick number 1 does not work. The next part of lazy man trick number 2 says the numerator must be an even number to try this trick. 10 is even, so I can try the trick. And the trick says if half of the numerator is a factor of the denominator, then it's the GCF. Okay, the numerator is 10, and half of 10 is 5. So let's see if 5 is a factor of the denominator. I'll go through my 5 times tables and see if I ever get to 15. 5, 10, 15. Yes, that's my denominator, 15. Therefore, 5 is a factor of 15, so the GCF is 5. I need to take that GCF, make a window box, and divide both the numerator and denominator by it. So here's my window box, divide it in half. Same thing that goes on the top must go on the bottom. Bring up my 5, that's my GCF. GCF is what goes inside the window box. I'm going to reduce or simplify, so I want my digits to be smaller, which means I have to divide. Finish my setup, which is an equal sign in my new fraction bar, and now I can do the math. 10 divided by 5 is 2. 15 divided by 5 is 3. So 10/15 simplifies to 2/3. Let's try lazy man trick number 2 on letter C. The fraction for C was 21/35 that I need to fully simplify. Lazy man trick number 2 says only try this trick if trick number 1 did not work. I had tried trick number 1 and it did not work, so I can move on for trick number 2. The next part of lazy man trick number 2 says the numerator must be an even number to try this trick. My numerator is 21, and 21 is not even, so trick number 2 will not work. Therefore, for letter C, I'll have to find the GCF of both 21 and 35 to simplify this fraction. So this next way that I'm going to show you is the way that always works. You can use it all the time if you like to, and you must use it if trick number 1 and trick number 2 don't work. So as we learned in Pkt B lesson 1, you find the GCF of both the numerator and the denominator. And once you find that GCF, you divide both the numerator and denominator by it to get the simplified fraction. So we were not able to solve letter C with either of the lazy man tricks. Therefore, we're going to follow this way that always works. Let's write down C, 21/35. This is the way that always works. You can use it all the time. So we're going to find the GCF of the numerator and denominator. So I take my numerator, which is 21, and let's find the factors of it. 1 always works, and 1's partner all the way on the right side is 21. Does 2 work? Well, divisibility rules of 2, it has to end in an even number. 1 is not an even number, so this is not divisible by 2. Does 3 work? Divisibility rules of 3, add the digits, and if it's divisible by 3, the whole number is. 2 plus 1 equals 3. Yep, that's divisible by 3, so this has to be divisible by 3. 3 times what equals 21? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. Up 3 times 7 equals 21. Don't forget your commas. Does 4 work? 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. Nope. Does 5 work? The last digit is not a 0 or a 5, so 5 does not work. Does 6 work? In order to be divisible by 6, the number has to be divisible by both 2 and 3. This number is not divisible by 2, so therefore it cannot be divisible by 6. Does 7 work? Oh, I already have a 7, so I'll draw my arrow because I am done. Okay, now let's find the factors of 35. Put my 35 with the colon. 1 and 35. Does 2 work? Well, the last digit is 5. That's not an even number, so 2 cannot work. Does 3 work? 3 plus 5 equals 8. No, 8's not divisible by 3, so 3 doesn't work. What about 4? 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36. Nope, 4 doesn't work. 5? Oh, well, it ends in a 5, so it has to be divisible by 5. 5 times 7 equals 35. Does 6 work? Well, it's not divisible by 2 and 3, so 6 does not work. Does 7 work? Oh, I already have a 7, so put my arrow. I am done. Now that I found all the factors, I need to find the greatest common factor. So I'll look at 21. Do I see that as a factor of my 35? No. Not there. Cross out 21. Look at 7. Do I see that as a factor of 35? Yes, I do. There it is. It's the 7. So that's my greatest common factor. I have to take that and put that in the window box. Let's draw my window box. Bring my greatest common factor, put it in both sections of the window box. Since I'm simplifying or reducing, I will divide to make my digits smaller. Equals, in my fraction bar, 21 divided by 7 equals 3. 35 divided by 7 equals 5. So 21 35ths, fully simplified, equals 3/5. Just a note, we fully simplified all these fractions by putting the greatest common factor in both the top and bottom of the window box and dividing. So these factors are all fully simplified. But sometimes students make mistakes and they find a common factor, but not the greatest common factor to put in the window box. So they've simplified their fraction, but they haven't fully simplified it or fully reduced it. So we have some tricks that we can do to help us see if our fraction is fully simplified. The first one is in green. If there's a 1, the fraction is done. And letter A is the perfect example of this. My final answer, 1/2, there's a 1, my numerator is a 1. So if there's a 1, I know my fraction is done. I definitely can't go any farther. Let's take a look at the blue example. If the difference between the numerator and denominator is 1, the fraction is done. And letter B is a perfect example of this. It's kind of like counting order, right? In letter B, my fraction, my reduced fraction is 2/3. I count 2, 3. There's a difference of 1 between them. So that fraction is done. Another trick says if the GCF is 1, the fraction is done. So if I look at letter A, the reduced fraction is 1/2. Well, the factors of 1 are 1, and the factors of 2 are 1 and 2, so the GCF, greatest common factor, is 1. Letter B, 2/3, the factors of 2 are 1 and 2. The factors of 3 are 1 and 3, so the GCF is 1, which means it's done. If I look at C, 3/5, the factors of 3 are 1 and 3. The factors of 5 are 1 and 5, so the GCF is 1. Therefore, that fraction is done. But notice something in red. If both the numerator and denominator are both even numbers, then your fraction is not done, because at the very least you can divide again with another window box by 2. So always check your factors to make sure that it is fully reduced. And the first thing I look for are they both even? Because if they are both even, it is not done and I need to reduce again. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 1 right now. I suggest that you go back to number 1 in the video and go through each trick just like I did to try it for each problem. Go through it with me to solve number 1. So to review, a fraction is in simplest form or fully reduced or in lowest terms, because they all mean the same thing, when 1 is the only common factor of the numerator and denominator of the fraction. We fully simplify a fraction by finding the GCF of both the numerator and denominator and dividing both of them by it. There are 2 lazy man tricks that I like to try first. You don't have to try them first, but you can if you like to. In our first example, letter A, 9/18, lazy man trick number 1 did work because the numerator 9 was a factor of the denominator. I went through my 9 times tables. I did get to 18. So therefore I knew that 9 was my greatest common factor, put it in my window box, and I reduced it to 1/2. Letter B, lazy man trick number 2 worked. Remember, I can only try lazy man trick number 2 if I tried one and it doesn't work, and I did. Lazy man trick number 2 also only works if my numerator is an even number and 10 was an even number. So what I do is I take half of that, half of 10 is 5. 5 was a factor of 15, because when I go through my 5 times tables, I do say 15. So 5 was the GCF that I was able to put in the window box. Remember, for letter C, lazy man trick number 1 didn't work, lazy man trick number 2 didn't work, so I have to go to the regular GCF way, which is the way that you could use all of the time if you wanted to. But you have to use if neither of the tricks work. So what I did is I simply found all of the factors of my numerator, 21, I found all of the factors of my denominator, 35, went through to find the greatest common factor, I put that greatest common factor in the window box and divided. Hopefully by now you can confidently say, I can fully simplify fractions, I can fully reduce fractions, and I can put fractions into lowest terms. Because if you can do one, you can do them all. Again, they're all the same thing. Remember, you do not need to use either of these lazy man tricks. You can always go back to lesson 2, find the GCF, and divide by the GCF. That will work all the time. Good luck with this lesson.